Hello and welcome to Homebrew MTG. It's been a week of opening MTG products and this episode is no different. Today we have from the Commander Precon set that has been released aside Ikoria Lair of Behemoths, we have, look at that. This video will be talking about the contents of the box, in my opinion the highlights of the cards in the packet, the direction that I personally will be taking in upgrading this deck. We'll be picking 20 cuts and 20 cards to include, all under the £5 barrier, with the aim of improving this deck but not spending that much money on it to make it as competitive as it can be. Okay, let's open it up. So, big box. Let's get into it. In the box you will get a full foil oversized card of the Commander. If we can get it open, let's try the bottom, shall we? Okay, hopefully it'll come out now. I'm not going to use the box for later on, don't worry. Okay, so look at that. Nice. I'll put that to one side. Plop on the floor. So we get a full, fully foiled oversized card. So that's of the face Commander. Let's give it a quick read. Kathril Aspect Warper costs 2 colourless, a plains, a swamp and a forest for a 3/3 legendary nightmare insect. When Kathril Aspect Warper enters the battlefield, put a flying counter on any creature you control if a creature in your graveyard has flying. Repeat this process for First Strike, Double Strike, Death Touch, Hexproof, Indestructible, Lifelink, Menace, Reach, Trample and Vigilance, then put a 1/1 counter on Kathril for each counter put on a creature this way. So the direction that we're going to be taking in this deck is filling it up with creatures with lots of keywords, keyword soup, and hopefully once we fill the graveyard to the brim, we'll get out Kathril to boost Kathril in a potentially Voltron strategy, which is just the Commander attacking himself to try to get that win from Commander damage, or depending on the creatures that we have, we can choose to buff them and hopefully implement a meaningful attack with more than one creature. The alternative Abzan Commander, Abzan is the plains, swamp and forest symbols, that wedge classification. The other Abzan Commander is Tyam, which leans more into a counters theme, but we're going to focus just on the face card for this deck tech. So inside you get a nice little pamphlet telling you about what the legendaries are in the deck, what you would need to do. So just like I've said, what Kathril, his strategy is, what Tyam's strategy is, and then if you choose the partner commanders, what you would need to do to make them work. Each deck has a pair of legendary partners. It also gives you a little bit of a rundown of the Commander rules, which is quite nice, and also a little bit of a plug for the new Ikoria set. On the back, you've got some nice artwork of Kathril, of Tyam, a little bit of lore, that's cool, and Nakara and Yannick, they are the partner commanders. Pretty cool. Alright, so let's see what else we've got. A nice little spin down counter. Not as good as the crackdown counters that you get in the Commander anthology, but it'll do. And here we have a blank piece of cardboard. I'm not sure how that's going to help us in our quest to win a Commander game, but here we go, 100 cards, and we'll crack into that in just a second. You also get some punch out counters and tokens to help with the cards and represent the cards that you have in your deck. These are a little bit different to, if I can get into them, these are a little bit different to the counters in the main Ikoria set because this one has indestructible counters on it, and I think hexproof counters. So that one, I know that's definitely not in the main set, so that's pretty cool. Tokens, they include a They include some flying Death Touch insects, some spirits. Very nice. It seems that it's going to be making a few insects and spirits because that's pretty much all the tokens that we've got. Any different ones? No, it's just insects and spirits. Cool. All right, so I'm going to move this out of the way and then we can get into our main deck. So with the deck, I'll be talking about the highlights and which cards I would eventually cut and the inclusions that I would add. Okay, here we go. We'll put that in shot, very nice, and we'll get rid of this cardboard token. Before opening the box, I've made a list of which cards I would take in and put out. So as they come up, I'll put them to one side and then explain my reasoning shortly. So, just looking at the cards, a Vending Huntbonder, double strike, when it attacks, put a double strike counter on another attacking creature. Cartographer's Hawk, we'll come to that one in just a second. Vitality Hunter, this is quite nice to give all your team lifelink. Daring Fiendbonder, Neverborn Auto, this is pretty cool, reducing the cost of your commander. You just have to pay your life, and life is a great resource in Commander, so we like that card. Obscuring Haze, this is part of the cycle that you can pay for free if you have a commander. This is better than people are making out because you play this in combat, it could turn into a big blowout for your opponents. Selective Adaptation, I'm really excited to play with this card, could enable some massive plays. Slippery Bogwander, I think this is going to be my favourite new card that they've implemented in this deck in terms of giving hexproof or keywords to creatures. Hexproof is going to be an extremely important keyword in this deck. Nesting Grounds, this is quite nice. Not going to be as relevant if you are going down Kathril's line of play, but still synergistic with some of the cards that we have in our deck because we will be putting some keyword ability counters on some of our creatures. Achroma, Angel of Wrath, this is keyword soup personified. You're going to want to keep these sort of cards in your deck. They are going to boost up Kathril a hell of a lot when they are in your graveyard. Angel of Finality, very nice. Cataclysmic Gearhulk, Kalemne's Captain. Odric, we like Odric, has the potential to give your whole team any one of those, if not all of your keywords. Very nice. Revlark, you're going to be running quite a few low cost power creatures, so you can put these back into your graveyard and you can pay the evoke cost to put this straight into your graveyard to guarantee Kathril has flying. Solemn Recruit, double strike. Sunblast Angel, if you haven't watched the Game Nights episode, this was an absolute blowout. Really good stuff. Together Forever, this has the potential to keep one of your creatures alive, which is super cool. Zetalpa, this is another keyword soup all-star. Each of these keywords they can trigger with Kathril, so that is going to be something that you want to put into your graveyard. Cairn Wanderer, we'll come to that one. Ever After, Soul of Innistrad, a nice recursion engine with Death Touch on top. Soul Flayer, Hornet Queen, this is going to be also another little all-star in your deck. Lots of flying Death Touch insects. Majestic Myriarch, Splinter Fight, Absan Ascendancy, this is a little bit of an all-star. Whenever one of your creatures dies, create a spirit token and put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Ajani, Archon on Vala's Reach. We're mainly going to be playing creatures, so playing this means your opponents can't cast instant sorceries, planeswalkers or enchantments, so it's not going to affect you that much, hopefully, whilst having some really good keywords. Deadwood Chant, fill up that graveyard as fast as you can, very nice. A little bit slow this one, I'll be talking about potential alternatives in this deck, but not bad as a precon option. I'll put that to one side. Karametra, probably one of the better reprints in this deck, indestructible and ramp all day long. Mimic Vat, yes please, we like this. Copy your creatures, bring them back, all the value. And onto our lands, we'll be talking about which lands I think should be kept and which ones should be taken out. 1, 2, and some of them are still a little bit slow, but thinking about the cost of this deck tech, the more expensive options, they tend to be in the land base. Bonder's Ornament, Arcane Signet, this is an all-star for fixing. Soul Ring, it's going to be great in any deck, let's be honest. Swiftfoot Boots, nice protection for your commander. Blood Curdle, we'll come back to this one. Unbreakable Bond, Void Beckoner, these are the big cycling creatures that you can put into your graveyard quite quickly, but then also put a keyword counter on your creatures. Then if you have the mana later on, you can have them come out as big monsters. The impetuses, we'll come to those shortly. Nice keywords with the Vampire Nighthawk and the Responder. A little bit of recursion in this deck. We like Unburial Rites out of the options that we already have because it has flashback. You're going to have cards in your graveyard, and flashback is very versatile. Some nice ramp and card draw with Course of Fate and Harmonize, and a little bit of searching for some lands and self-mill with the Satyr Wayfinder. Skullwinder is not too bad. We'll come to that one shortly. Abzan Charm, one of my favourite Abzan cards. A very versatile card draw, distribute 1/1 counters, which is going to be useful in this deck, and exile potentially another creature. Some removal in the way of exile. Despark is a very underrated card. I would be running it in more decks if you can. And not only does Death Sprout destroy a creature, it ramps you as well. Grizzly Salvage. This is going to be some nice searching for some creatures or lands and some self-mill. Last few cards. Oh yeah, we'll get to them. Nyx Weaver, this is an all-star as well. Nice keyword, but milling 2 each game and then getting any card from your graveyard by exiling it. This is a superstar in this deck. I didn't mention the Acidic Slime. This is pretty good as well. Destroy any target enchantment or land and Death Touch to boot. And then on the reverse, we have our legendary creatures. So Kathril, that's going to be our face card. Very nice too. We're going to be trying to build into his strategy. Second, we have Tyam. We're not going to focus all in on the counters, but his ability of granting vigilance counters and being able to remove them for self-mill and a little bit of recursion, we're still going to keep this in our deck. And the partner commanders, they have some nice keyword abilities that we can make use of, and they can give us some card draw and some pseudo protection while giving counters to other creatures. So these look pretty fun and synergistic in this deck. Okay, so counting up all the cards that we have, we should have 20 cards that we are going to cut. Obviously you can make more cuts or less cuts depending on your preferences, but just for this video we're going to pick 20 cards that I think are the weakest or not as synergistic or useful in your deck, and suggesting some cheaper alternatives for you to consider to increase the power level of this deck. Okay, so we have 20 cards. So first up we are going to be looking at the lands. Straight up, the land count in this deck is 38. Now, I think we can get away with 36 land. We're going to be replacing some of the cards with some extra ramp and mana fixing. So I'm comfortable playing 36 lands. I think 38, yes, you can be a little bit more conservative, but 36 to 38 lands. And considering we're going to be putting cards into our graveyard, we don't want them going into the graveyard opposed to our creatures with keywords. So straight off the bat, these 3 lands, the gain life lands, come in tapped and gaining you 1 life. My suggestion, yes, it is better to get cards or land cards that don't come in tapped, but for a cheaper alternative to fetch lands and more expensive lands that are available, if you are going to have your lands come in tapped, then you're going to want them to have a better effect than gaining just 1 land. So the Squire lands, they have recently been reprinted in M20, the core set, and Theros Beyond Death. These are a straight up swap for these tapped gain life lands. Yes, I do have a foil one, I just happen to have it in my collection, but generally these are not going to cost you more than £2 to £3 each, and well worth it in looking at the top card of your deck, knowing whether you should draw it or whether you should self-mill into your graveyard. Okay, so we've got the lands, we're adding those. Talking about the 2 lands that we're just going to straight get rid of. These are both quite slow and clunky, both come into play tapped. If you're looking for a land that puts a card from your graveyard, Mortuary Mire is a lot better option, and it doesn't cost you 3, and this is just quite slow. We've already got Mirrored Landscape in our deck. We want to be avoiding cards that come into play tapped and then paying 2 to then put 2 more lands into the battlefield tapped. It's just going to be too slow. There are alternatives for potential lands that you can put in tapped. These are from Judgment, I think. They are quite nice, ignore the scratch, but they come in untapped for 1 colorless mana, and then if you control Swamp, which we have more swamps than forests in this deck, then you can tap for Golgari colors. So these cycle are pretty good. This is the only one that I had to hand. Other lands that could be pretty cool. This is pretty bashed up from the World Championships, but Wasteland and Strip Mine, I haven't included them in these particular changes because they are more on the expensive side, but being able to recur from Tyam and some of the other cards that we've suggested, we could include a little bit of naughty land destruction in our deck. Moving on to the cuts that are non-land, first up we have Skullwinder. I'm not really on board with the hype around this card. When it enters the battlefield, return target card from your graveyard to your hand, then choose an opponent. That player returns a card from their graveyard to their hand. I don't like symmetrical effects. Your opponents could equally get something decent. I know it's got Death Touch, but we are going to be replacing it with relevant keywords, so not overly fussed about that one. So my suggestion is not a creature, but it does do that ability without the symmetrical downside. Regrowth is just 2 mana, return target any card from your graveyard to your hand. I really like Regrowth. Get back your biggest creature, even put Kathril into the graveyard and then return it to your hand to reduce its commander cost. Super versatile, super cheap, super effective. My next lot of cuts are going to be the Impetus Cycle. I've spoken about these in my Commander Rebrews, where we spoke about the cards in all the Commander sets. These Impetuses, yes, they're pretty fun when they do go off, but you're going to feel bad about these cards when they are dead in your hand. When you're in a 1v1 situation, they are essentially dead cards because you have to equip them to your own creatures, and I don't want to be paying 5 mana to give one of my creatures must be blocked. So it's only one creature that has to be blocked and a +3/+3. They're expensive auras if you have to put them onto your own creatures, and even in a 4-player game, if you're down to the last 2, the same argument is they're not going to be as effective. So I've chosen 3 cards. The swaps that I've been making are roughly the same color, so we don't have to change the mana base in terms of colors, with the aim for them to be cheaper, if not the same CMC, to lower our mana curve. So swapping out for the Martial Impetus, I am going to include a Perpetual Timepiece, colorless mana, so we don't have to worry about the planes. This is going to be super useful in your deck. Tapping it to put the top 2 cards of your library into a graveyard, some self-mill. And the problem with running a graveyard deck is going to be susceptible to targeted or just straight up graveyard hate. So paying 2 and exiling this card, you can put any number of target cards from your graveyard into your library to save your precious pieces and then hopefully use them later on in the game. Up next, we have a swap for Parasitic Impetus, costing the same mana. Funeral Rites is a new card from the Feros Beyond Death set. You draw 2 cards, you lose 2 life and pop the 2 top cards of your library into your graveyard. I find with the precons they're usually lacking a little bit of card draw. With this, you're drawing those cards, but then there's some incidental self-mill, which is what we're going to be including. Super cheap option in terms of money, and it's going to be pretty useful in most situations. Remember, life is a resource. We don't mind about losing 2 life. And our swap for Predatory Impetus, it's going to be Kodama's Reach. We've already got Cultivate in our deck, but this is an all-star in terms of ramp. Get 2 basic land cards, put 1 into your hand, 1 onto the battlefield tap. You can't get better. We want to make use of green. Green has the best access to ramp, so Kodama's Reach is definitely an include. Okay, let's tidy these up. Moving on to our next cut. We do like recursion in this deck because there's going to be lots of creatures in the graveyard. However, the problem with Ever After is, our cards going walkabouts, is that it costs 6 CMC and it only targets your creatures. So the swap that I'm suggesting is Animate Dead. Just 2 CMC that allows you to target any creature, not just your creatures in your graveyard, so your opponents, and bring it back. Also, because it's an enchantment, we can use Tyam's ability and some other recursion options to bring it back from the graveyard. This has just been reprinted in the mystery boosters, so you can get your hands on it for about £2 or £3, which I think is a much better and cheap option. Up next, I'm just going to find the other card that is similar. So we have a Cairn Wanderer, and where are we? We got there in the end. We'll get rid of our cut pile. So these 2 cards, they sound really good on the face of it. They essentially give your creatures Cairn Wanderer, it gives itself, and Majestic Myriarch at the beginning of your combat. Lots of keywords that are going to be found in your graveyard. Cairn Wanderer, however, it costs 5, and lots of the keywords aren't actually going to be in our graveyard because they don't synergize well with Kathril. Fear, Haste, Landwalk, Protection, and Shroud, they aren't going to be applicable in this deck. So it reduces the effectiveness of this card. Same argument for Majestic Matriarch, or Myriarch, if I said it. This card reads well, but unfortunately, based on our more Voltron style strategy in this deck, you're not going to have that many creatures to make use of its doubling power and toughness clause. And this clause here, at the beginning of each combat, it's going to make it susceptible to removal if it does happen to have hexproof and indestructible creatures on your board. So I could be wrong, but based on initial playtesting online, they haven't been as good as you would like them to. And at 10 CMC total combined, and coupled with the fact that they don't actually have any inherent keywords, I don't believe that they justify being stuck around in this deck. Odric, which is another card in this deck, does the same ability if you would like to keep it, but for 1 mana less, and it gives your whole team those keywords. So I think we can pick better options. So for the suggestion for the swap for the Majestic Chimera, I can't say the last bit, I'm going to go for Multani, Yavi Maya's avatar. Yes, it costs 1 CMC more, but the potential and versatility of this card is so much better. It's got a similar clause in the fact that it has a yet to be determined power and toughness. However, based on the strategy of this deck, you're going to be putting lots of cards into your graveyard, and this gets power and toughness based on each land you control and each land in your graveyard. It's pretty cool. Plus, with the reach and trample abilities, you're going to feed Kathril, and you can recur this, return 2 lands you control to their owner's hand, return this from the graveyard to the battlefield. So once you've done the Kathril's ability and you want this to be put into your deck and play it later on, you can. It's really good, self-recurring. I would definitely recommend this card, and not too expensive too. My swap for the Cairn Wanderer is going to be Gravebreaker Lamia. It costs the same CMC, it's got the same power and toughness. However, it's going to feed Kathril with the lifelink keyword, and more importantly, when it enters the battlefield, search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. You can get your biggest creature or your most keyworded creature, i.e. Sepulta or a Chroma, to feed Kathril. And some of the cards that you're going to be using, for example, Unburial Rites, with the flashback cost, it costs 1 less, but that is not going to be as relevant as the other 2. So for a straight up swap, a inexpensive card in terms of monetary value, this is going to be a lot more effective in feeding your Kathril. I would recommend Gravebreaker Lamia. Up next, we have a couple white cards. Through different circumstances, we are going to be trying to get rid of different permanents your opponent controls. So when Kalemne's captain becomes monstrous, exile all artifacts and enchantments, and Cataclysmic Gearhulk, when it enters the battlefield, each player chooses a permanent and they sacrifice the rest. This card is far too expensive, casting 7 on top of the 5 that it already costs to get the 5/5 creature out. It's going to be too expensive, even if you are exiling all artifacts. And the Cataclysmic Gearhulk, it affects you, so we don't actually want to be getting rid of our own stuff, to be honest. The artifacts and the enchantments are quite few and far between, so we'd rather keep those on the battlefield. So my suggestions to replace those cards that have both double mana pips in them: Cleanse and Nova. This is a really versatile board wipe, destroy all creatures or destroy all artifacts. And Heliod's Intervention, I think it's one of the most underrated enchantment and artifact removal pieces in the whole of Commander. It scales super well. If your opponent has 3 enchantments, then you can just pay 5 overall to get rid of all the enchantments or artifacts that you might have. And then even if that isn't an option and you need a little bit of life to keep you going, you can pay the second cost to gain X life twice and at instant speed. So yes, these are instants and sorceries, but we do have enough creatures with keywords to fuel Kathril. So these are definitely going to go in. Okay, on to the next 2 cuts. So these aren't necessarily awful. The Daring Fiendbonder is quite good early game, getting some damage in, and the Indestructible counter is pretty good, just for 2 mana, but you have to have it in your graveyard. It's quite expensive for a 5/1 though. And Angel of Finality, you're actually not going to be focusing on your opponent's graveyard. Yes, it has flying, but I think we can get some better keywords in there. So my suggestions to replace these 2 would be a couple of gods. Now, most of the god cycles, they have Indestructible, which is going to be fantastic with Kathril. And the Amonkhet gods, they have an additional keyword ability. This one has Menace. So I picked these 2 because they are going to feed into Kathril and filling up our graveyard. They're not going to be too expensive, about £3 or £4, so under the £5 limit. So Bond 2, we can sacrifice another creature, Squire 1, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So a nice little Squire ability and life drain, but the sacrifice another creature is super important, getting those keywords into your graveyard. And Nalaya Keen-Eyed, not only does it reduce your creatures casting cost by 1, but reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card, put it into your graveyard. Put it into your hand. Otherwise, you may put it into your graveyard. So a little bit of searching that allows you to fill up your graveyard to boot. 2 really solid options that are going to feed Kathril. You're not going to be disappointed to put them in. Up next, we have Cartographer's Hawk. Now, this card, it looks good and it's trying to ease the problems that white has. However, you have to jump through a lot of hoops to get through these. I would just prefer a better straight up creature that has a more relevant keyword, and we've already included things like Kodama's Reach that will help us with our lands a little bit. So my suggestion for a lower CMC is Gladececover Scout. It might seem a little bit innocuous, but this little elf has hexproof, and that's going to be one of the best keywords for Kathril. Put that into our graveyard, your opponents can't target Kathril. So straight up swap. Yes, it's trying to ease white's problems, but I think just better card for this deck is going to be our little elf. Okay, next up we have Bonder's Ornament. This is not a very good mana rock, let's be honest. It's poor in a vacuum of opening the precons out of the box, and you're just going to have better options in terms of mana rocks. So my suggestions, this could be a dual suggestion. I'm going to put the Leyline Prowler into my deck, but you could just get away with a new card from the Ikoria set, a Damper Crystal. You can cycle it away and get any of the colours that you need. Really inexpensive. But I like the Leyline Prowler because not only does it give you that fixing, it also feeds into the keyword abilities. Death Touch and Lifelink. Kathril is going to thank you giving those keywords to him. So that one is going in, that one is coming out. Up next, we have Ajani Unyielding. So this one, it's bad. It's not a great planeswalker. If you want to be destroying or getting rid of a creature your opponent controls, you want to be destroying it rather than exiling it, because then you could potentially bring it back with Animate Dead. You're not going to get to the ultimate very often, and unlike Nalia the Keen-Eyed, it doesn't put cards into your graveyard, it puts them on the bottom of your library. So if we're looking for a big splashy card for an expensive mana cost, I'm going to suggest Morality Shift. So cost 7 mana, yes, but you can exchange your graveyard and your library, then shuffle your library. So if you have about 10 cards in your graveyard, just by incidental self-mill and creatures dying, you can play this card and then get 90 cards in your graveyard, which is ridiculous. So cards like Multani, they're going to grow super big. Kathril is pretty much going to have every keyword that it wants. It is outrageous. I would definitely recommend this card. And last but not least, we have Soul Flayer. This card is just straight up bad in this deck. It goes against what Kathril wants to achieve because it exiled the cards with the keyword abilities. So rather than getting rid of cards in your graveyard, we want to put cards in our graveyard. So my suggestion for a lower CMC is Buried Alive. Search up to 3 creature cards and put them into your graveyard. You can search for the best keyworded or most useful creatures, put them into your graveyard, feed Kathril. You're going to be super happy. This is an all-star in this deck. So we've made 20 changes, and hopefully they will do you well if you choose to include them. It's all about getting to grips with your deck, whatever makes you happy. Play test them, tweak your deck, and then just if it's a card at a time, you can improve your deck based on your playstyle. Hopefully some of the suggestions that I've included will get onto your radar and be under your consideration. I've just made 20 changes, but like I said, you can add more or you could add less to that. I'm just going to run through some of the cards that you could also consider that I've not actually put into my deck so far, but could very well be contenders once I've play tested a little bit more myself. So talking about the gods, they're super versatile, super effective with Kathril, Indestructible and Double Strike. You're going to get a lot of value out of these gods. If you're looking for keyword soup, Ranuamp Hydra gets you Vigilance, Reach and Trample. Not too worried about the desert clauses, but if you want to go down that route, then you can definitely feed this to make it bigger. Two really useful keywords in Barassa Tower Archer, Hexproof and Reach. The 2-colour forest pips are a little bit restrictive though, so if you have guaranteed ways of getting your forest out, this is definitely a consideration. A couple nice keyword creatures. We have Segovian Angel, Flying and Vigilance just for 1 planes, a Thorn-Wheeled Archer, Reach and Death Touch just for 2 mana, and Double Strike and Flying, Sky Hunter Skirmisher, very nice too. Damphia Caspian, or Caspian, I can't say that. Paragon, First Strike, Vigilance, Lifelink, super useful for Kathril. We'll keep going. Vampire of the Dire Moon, Death Touch and Lifelink just for 1 mana. Stonecoil Serpent is super cool. Reach, Trample and Protection from Multicolored. So this will not only feed into the 1/1 counters sub-theme in our deck, but feed the keywords. If you like the strategy of Buried Alive and Morality Shift, Final Parting and Jared's Orders, they are going to let you search for cards and put them into your graveyard and your hand. Super nice. You're going to have cards in your graveyard, so why not make use of their benefits? As long as you have Brawn in your graveyard and you control forest, creatures you control have trample. Super nice. Let's talk about some potential recursion. Back for more, this is pretty nice. Return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. You can have it fight, so you're going to have lots of creatures with lifelink and death touch. That's going to be really cool, bringing back your creatures. An underrated card, Macabre Waltz, I think I said that right. Return up to 2 target creatures from your graveyard to your hand, then discard a card. So once you've used Kathril's ability, you want to hopefully bring back and cast your creatures, and then you can discard a card that you would like in your graveyard just for the cost of 2 mana. Some all-stars here. So I said that I would keep these 2 cards to one side, June Blast and Blood Curdle. We have 2 new cards from the new Ikoria set. Eerie Ultimatum costs the same mana as June Blast. That's going to get you pretty much all your creature cards. Oh, it's permanent cards as well, so your lands as well. In fact, I might have to put this in my deck. It's so broken. You're going to get pretty much every card from your graveyard back to your battlefield. And Blood Curdle, that can easily be replaced by Mythos of Nephoi. Destroy target non-land permanent if it's creature. Or if you cast that Selesnya colour combination, you can destroy any non-land permanent. Super good. And then the last couple cards, Winding Way. This is really cool, just for 2 mana. Put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard, but you get to choose either a land or creature type and then put all of that type into your hand. So if you're already stuck on land, you can choose this and hopefully get 2 or 3 lands and the rest go into your graveyard. Same counts for creatures. If you need creatures, choose creatures and then everything else goes back to your graveyard. Super useful. And then if you are more veering towards the counter theme, Cauldron of Souls, this is really potentially really nasty. Choose any number of target creatures. Each of those creatures gains persist. So when they die, they come back and they have a -1/-1 counter on it. A sort of self-fulfilling recurring engine, but it does kind of conflict with Kathril. So only if you are going down that counters build, I would recommend this card. So that's it from me. Hopefully I've given you some decent ideas to improve your own deck. Let me know in the comments if there's any cards that you would have suggested for this deck and any play experiences that you wish to share. I'm all ears. I'm super excited to hear your experiences from this deck and how you chose to upgrade it. That's all from me from Homebrew MTG. Until the next time, cheers.